My name is Joe Woodham. Welcome to All Things Design, the podcast that unpacks how design drives digital transformations. Today, we're speaking with Katy Zoghi, Principal Experience Designer and former Head of Experience Design at NBN. Katy, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Good to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Now, I like to start with an opening question. Why are you a designer?
I feel like you're opening a can of worms. It's really about, for me, it's really about that aspect of empathy and creativity, and really making sure whatever we are designing and creating is helping people and helping our users to get what they're looking for. That's the really short version of it.
So then how did you realize that at a young age that that's the direction you wanted to take your career in, or like coming from school? Like, I love this, let's do this.
No, I didn't get there so quickly. It took me years to get
Okay.
there. I did my master's. I have two masters in IT and MBA. I did my master in Melbourne Uni, and I started as a small company, becoming working on it as a basically being a digital analyst, which is like a data analyst for digital interaction of the users on websites. So I was really looking for what they're doing, how we are adding value to the business. Is business getting what they're looking for? What's the bounce rate, etc. And I was not super happy with what I was doing, in a sense of I thought I could do more and I could be looking at what is the problem, how can I help to resolve some of the issues by looking outside of the box and being more creative. At a time, my husband was working in a digital agency, and the head of experience design, they recommended that I read a book about design, and it was the Don't Make Me Think book. I started reading about that. I remember going to work, reading that in the train, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is exactly how I feel while I interact with the websites and the digital services. I took a leap of faith and enrolled in the UX immersive course in General Assembly. And that was really a turning point for me. I was like, yep, this is where I belong. We did that, incorporating design thinking and creativity and empathy with the users to design something that's meaningful and delights the user.
Like, it's a bit of a shift. Data analytics and design are kind of on opposite sides of the IT stratosphere, really, but they kind of work together, if that makes sense. So like a good designer needs to understand how data impacts design, right? So like, do you think it's strengthened your move into design, understanding that side of things first?
Oh, absolutely. I think data plays a significant role in driving transformation or building a product or in kind of that continuous improvement. It really helps you make data-driven decisions instead of gut feeling decisions. So what I've been experiencing for the past couple of years, there has been a lot of gut feeling or personal decisions that have personal agenda into it. Whereas when we have data doesn't lie, and you need to incorporate that and really track whether it's a user behavior on a Google Analytic, Adobe Analytic, or is it like a wider interaction or data from the users through Splunk and other bigger platforms, and then incorporate that into, okay, this is where we are as a benchmark, and this is where we are going to go, and use that data model and data thinking and decision making as a means to make improvement to your products and go through the right path and analyze all the way to see, have you made the right choices? If not, what can you do in order to resolve it? But yeah, over time, I've seen that a lot of people don't either have that understanding of data or don't want to have that understanding of data, but it's absolutely essential to make right decisions. So I'm really grateful that I have that background.
I guess as a designer, it's a scary thing. You think I guess, oh, for some reason my video stopped. Give me a second. All good. I can edit that. Like, it must be like a bit of a scary thing for a designer. Like, you come in thinking it'll be focusing on users and, to a degree, designing, right? Like working with users to understand it, and then understanding that you have to really learn and hone in on understanding what the data actually is to make better decisions or more informed decisions. Like, I could understand it's probably a bit of a culture shock for anyone. But I guess that probably leads into the conversation a little bit more around how you're at NBN at the moment. I imagine it's a pretty complex environment there. They're a huge organization. Understanding how the business, how do you translate the business's strategy and vision back to, I guess, actionable design initiatives? So like, how are you breaking it down? Do you take data into that approach?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In everything I do, I try to incorporate data and as a means of making sure that I can show how I have made changes and improved the experience or the performance. So I'll give you an example. The current project I'm working on, the way that I have set it up with the business owner is really trying to understand what are the user needs, what are some of the pain points, what do they want to achieve, and also what is the wider business strategy for that specific business unit, and how can we prioritize those key actionable items for improving user needs and align it to the business needs. By doing that, what we have done is that really dig into what's the current state of the users, and by saying if the business need is reduction in cost, how can we reduce the cost by, for instance, reducing the time that they waste on a specific part of the portal because some of the issues, and that would directly result in reduction in cost for the business. So it's kind of a level of translating some of the business outcomes, the key outcomes of the business to the project. So you need to always really make sense out of it. So business have the wider strategy and chaos or I don't know, KPIs, and you need to each project. And for your involvement, I found that you need to kind of little bit shift it in order to make sense out of it and say, okay, you want to get there. This is how I'm going to get there by doing this specific task and this outcome. And data is really good in that because you can do that benchmark at the beginning and show how you have changed in the future.
I was gonna say, like with where you are at the moment, how good are the business at articulating what their strategy and vision is through to you for you to be able to understand where you need to start from a user perspective? Like, how do you fully understand what the business needs and pick that apart to find out where to start from a team perspective?
NBN, as you know, is a massive organization. And with big organization with multiple business units, what happens is that there's so many people and there's so many teams involved. So I can't really say how is the direction of the overall organization. My experience is that each part of the business have a different set of rules and performance with respect to that. The team that I'm working at the moment have kind of set up a clear foundation of what is the goal and what are the metrics and what is the objective of the business unit. And I've worked really closely as someone who works in design to flesh that out with the business owner. It's really important for me because over time, what I've experienced is that one of the weaknesses of designers is that we don't necessarily focus on the user needs. It's very important. Obviously, we want to make sure we are improving the user needs. But a product or service doesn't exist if we don't really take care of the business objective as well. I think that there should be a balance into understanding both sides and kind of bridging the gap between the two and making sure that you don't really just care about the user, but you also understand that business needs to be profitable, reduce the cost as much as possible, etc. And how can you help both the business and the user in that? So that's what
I think
I'm trying to do that.
that's a really, really good point. I think understanding the reason designers exist, right, is because there's a business that pays the bills. So you are essentially trying to solve business problems. So being able to understand what the stakeholder needs as they are trying to drive revenue growth or profitability for the business, that translates back into improving the user experience or improving the product for the user so the user sticks around, right? So it's like, how did you probably a more pointy end of the question is like, how did you learn that business acumen to understand how to communicate back to the business? Because I think that's a big challenge for a lot of designers is not really understanding what the business is trying to achieve and not being able to communicate in their sort of way of speaking rather than a user perspective. So most designers are very good at speaking to users and understanding users' problems, but not stakeholders. So like, what was your journey in unpacking how to do that?
There might be multiple factors. I never thought of it that way, but I love reading about successful businesses and how they have leveraged different business units and different part of their organization in order to get the outcome they want. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and probably my background in IT and business has helped me as well. But more importantly, over time, I've learned, even when I started as a UX designer, I was really about, I just want to do what's the best for the user. And I really disregarded that lens of the business. But listening to how, when there is a shift in the industry or economy and a company needs to get rid of people, design tends to be the first group of people who will get redundant, which is pretty sad because we do add a lot of value. But there has been research to show that actually one of the reasons is that this design is sometimes slow or not very good at showing their value to the business. And that's why the business is at times of pressure. They're all about, okay, who is adding value to me? And if the team were not able to show that, they're going to get rid of that. That's simple as that. This is a survival thing. So reading about that and kind of going through that path of understanding the business needs as well and reading about it has taught me over time that really listen to the business needs as well, like counting them as a part of the user as well. They are a user. They are trying to achieve something. I need to empathize with them. I need to hear them and kind of meet in the middle and see what we can do in order to achieve the results that helps both the user and the business.
Another really good point there. Design not obviously being able to communicate the value, and certain businesses, like it's not always the case, but over the last couple of years since COVID, we've seen like a big trend on downsizing of design teams through harder times. Like budgets have been reduced and design's been impacted quite significantly. I think it's slowly bouncing back now, but other organizations that highly value design and understand the value of design have actually probably held on to design or strengthened their design team through that time, because it's like, if design's positioned well within the business, it can be the driving force. But I think that's one of the common issues is design hasn't been able to prove its value in some organizations. And maybe they're older organizations that haven't got great design maturity, but I feel like it is changing over time, just not quick enough, I suppose.
Yeah, and it all obviously it's a very long and lengthy process, and it comes to the fact that maybe you need to always sell what the value of the design, but it can also be helpful if someone who is in higher level understands design and vouch for you and sponsor you. And some organizations don't have that person, so it really comes down to the fact that you need to do that constantly and be able to sell the value. Like you see big organization like Airbnb, that the founder is actually understanding it's coming from design background and how they become successful and how they value design into their process. But not all organizations are lucky in that way. And basically what happens is that you may not have designers or design savvy people on the leadership part of the organization to help you push through design into the bigger and more important part of the organization and products.
Yeah, I guess that's the benefit of having a younger organization that can be design led or founder led. Whereas, yeah, a lot of the bigger organizations, that's not how they operate anymore. I guess going back to, obviously that's the stakeholder and understanding the business needs side of things. How do you bring that back to your team to understand, well, to make sure that they understand what they need to do from their part, or to make sure they understand what the business needs them to do?
Yeah. The way that I've done it in the team while I was leading I was an acting role, was that really fleshing out, understanding what are the key outcomes of chaos for the organization of the business unit that I am in. And then what are some of the KPIs for design? And then as a team, as a collaborative kind of session, we go through how can we translate some of these KPIs into the chaos of the wider team and show that by doing this specific task, we will add value to this KO. whether it's a reduction in cost, reduction in time, depending on those KOs, or increasing user satisfaction, will be proved to increase customer or user satisfaction by doing this. And this is our KPIs. So mapping them out and then making sure the team is aware of those KPIs and aware of those KOs, and incorporate that into the language of the communication with the business team or the project team that they are working with. It's really important to constantly talk about it and say, this is how I have done it. This is how I'm contributing to the KO, to contributing to the company's success of outcome, whether it's in our day-to-day conversation, whether it's into the summary of the work that you're doing. So every couple of weeks, every 2 weeks, we would have a kind of a project update. And in the project update, I would encourage the team to talk about, use that language into the update. And that will help them when they talk to the business, talk to the project owner, how they have achieved those outcomes, and also help the leader to be able to push that back upwards to the more senior leadership team, that as a team, we are doing this, and this is how we are helping the business and not just the user as well, as hand in hand to be a successful business.
How have you refined that communication with your team to improve that over time? So I imagine as you mature as a design leader, you're able to communicate those KOs a little bit clearer. Like, have you seen improvements in how you do that? And what's the impact been back to maybe efficiencies for the team?
It's a mind shift, I would say. It takes time because as designers, we are not really trained to think about those KPIs in a sense. It's really part of the role of the leader to think about them. But I think it's a group or collaborative thing to do. It comes down to everyone. Everyone needs to vouch for design. Everyone needs to show how they have been constantly adding value, because it's a word of mouth. For instance, for in the company that I work in, when we want to get engaged into project and when there's a budget, obviously there is a process, but not everyone follow that process. It's really about what have you done in the past, and if they have heard good things, and if they know that you or your team have done something good and added value, then they will get back to you. So being that kind of owner of showing how you have added value is really good and important. And for the team, it takes time, because I found that designers are really about user needs, and even with respect to finding the mission and vision of the team, if you want to think about the user and the business goals, the subject can get a little bit sensitive, because they are like, we are user experience designers. We don't want to really think about the business. But I think that's something that we, as designers, have really, really need to get used to and incorporate that language slowly into our vocabulary and really think that way in order to survive and have more seat on the table, if that makes sense. So I think
It's
it's
an
a
interesting
slow process, but should constantly happen. Like, it's a constant reminder. So those bi-weekly sessions, which constantly remind the team to think about those languages and key outcome, was really helpful.
Look, you made another interesting point, which is designers don't really want to think about like the business goals and the profitability of a business, but like that's what actually drives design problems, right? Like if a business is profitable and growing, they're going to have bigger design challenges. And that's really what designers need to be aligning to, as well as solving the customer problems, right? Like the better that they do there, the better the business goes, which means they can invest more back into design. So proving design to the business means designers have a better job or a more enjoyable job and get to solve bigger challenges. Or so like they've got to think about that. And I think it's a really, really good designers need to educate themselves around that side of things. And it can't just be user focused. Like you mentioned, you have some pushback when people think about it from your team. Like how do you take them on the journey of going, this is a part of your job and it's always going to be?
It was there on the pack to think about it. And in every session, I would encourage the team to think about those outcomes and how to have added value. Add even one line about if what they have done has resulted to a specific KPI and how that KPI has helped. I think it's a constant reminder. There is a lot of pushback or a little bit of, I can see designers becoming a bit defensive about it because we proud ourselves to be user-centered. I get that, and I agree, we should be user-centered, but we need to consider the other party point of view in order to survive and succeed in our organization.
Could you consider them as users as well, right? Like you've got the stakeholder users and then you've got your product users. Both are a big part of what you do from a design perspective because you have to communicate with one to solve the other one's challenges. So being better at communicating on both ends.
Empathize with them, empathize and try to understand. Empathy is our base of our work and what we do. How cannot we empathize with the business when you're working with them as well? We shouldn't just focus on the user. I would say it will push us into the not essential bucket of employees, if that makes sense. And we will be the one who will get redundant the first. It's a trend. It's going around for so many companies. You can't ignore it, not just in Australia, in US as well. And that's a big problem.
Yes, I think design's matured a lot. Like I've been in the space for 15 years. So watching it mature, some organizations might have it, but when everyone's moved into the digital transformation side of things, it's such a mandatory piece of the puzzle to have on board. It's getting closer to where people understand the value. Like if you go back to the Airbnb example, they've proven how important design is in that business and how it enabled them to scale so quickly. So if any company's going down the digital transformation path and they don't think about design first, I think it's something like 69 or 70% of those don't meet. So the people that actually implement design at the start of a digital transformation to understand why they're trying to implement technology or who's going to be impacted by the technology and how the business is going to use it, they're so much more successful. I think like this stat, like, I can't actually remember what the specific stat is, but it's like, it's almost 70% more effective. Design does add a lot of value. It just needs to work out how to communicate it.
You brought a really good point about when to include design. I was actually listening to this podcast and this famous designer who was saying, companies come to me and say, can you come and help us with this problem? And he was saying, oh, it's like building a house and bring in the architecture once the building is done. It doesn't make any sense. We need to bring design at the beginning. And that's actually when we can add a lot of value because we can really understand the domain, what is the problem. We don't necessarily just jump into solution, which happens a lot. So we really help with shaping the problem, the user needs, and then focusing on the solution and then going through the path of prototyping and working, whether it's a product or service, to finalize the solution. But yeah, design is critical. There's so many research to show how design has added value and has helped organization. It's really about getting engaged at the right time and having the overall understanding of the business that we can add value, and that getting that sponsorship will really help us to be successful in our jobs.
I've been writing a white paper on this exact topic, which meant there was a lot of research involved in understanding the problem. And like I just looked into so many different examples of how, let's say, a digital transformation is done. Historically, it was technology driven, right? Like people are like, well, we need to update our technology. This is what we're going to do. But the approach that, let's say, Airbnb or Starbucks have taken, which is more of understanding the data and the insights, which feeds into the strategy and vision, which then feeds into human-centered design and understanding how people are going to use technology. And it kind of goes up that. So you start with that foundational base layer of data and insights, which actually is then the strategy and vision. So like, it's fascinating because if you don't get it right, it doesn't end up well. And it's a lot of wasted money, right? Like a company like big enterprises, digital transformations aren't cheap journeys to go on, right? So you want to make sure you're doing it the right way. And I think if you get design at the start of that, the success is far, far greater and the outcome's better for both the company and the users. So how does design position itself the right way? I think that's the current challenge, is making sure All organizations understand that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a really good point about data being the foundation, and looking at it as a with the human-centered lens is actually the first step of the human-centered design. Is really that research. You kind of diverge and you do a lot of research, whether it's about the user, whether it's about the business, whatever data you have, and then and kind of make sense out of it and converge. And you see there's a lot of proof that the companies who are human-centered companies are becoming more and more successful and getting better over time. And that goes to show the value of how human-centered design is it's proven to be a successful approach for a successful company, and not being a product-led company, being a user-centered or human-centered company. Because you
Yeah.
need to make sure whatever you're designing, it's for someone. If you build something and no one's going to use it, then what's the point? Because that's a problem that a lot of companies have. We need to build this really quickly. We need to be really quick turnover of features or product. But what's the point of making something when no one's not even going to use it?
Well, here's the thing, right? Like a lot of digital transformations are about improving technology, improving experience and operational efficiency, right? Like they want to save money, but they speed through a digital transformation, they do it the wrong way, and it kind of turns to shit. And at some point, they've got to spend a whole heap more money reworking the whole thing. So this is where design comes in, and what data and insight starting there is to understand what the actual problem is to feed into the strategy, but using design that whole way through that process to make sure it's thought out before it's just implementing. And the problem with Western culture is they just try and build stuff first. Like, let's build something and then we'll add design at the end to see if we can make it work for the user. But like, why wouldn't you just invest a little bit more money up front to make sure it's going to work for the user and then go and implement the technology on the backside?
Absolutely.
Well, hopefully we get there. Like I was interested, I guess, managing designers, that communication piece and being able to, I guess, work with stakeholders. Do you find that is a core part of your role at a place like MBN? Like, do you really need to hone that skill to be successful in an enterprise level company?
The communication piece.
Stakeholder management and communication with anyone other than just a user.
Yeah. Oh, I would say it's the top. It's maybe the first skill to have, because it's my experience is that when you work at some place, the core is really the relationship that you build with people. It's really important to understand individuals and understand their intention behind something, and work with them and really kind of help them to get there. And by doing that, by really that level of mutual understanding and stakeholder management, you will have a much higher chance of get engaged into a project as a designer and add value to the team. It's really, really important. I would say it's the top skill. I'm still learning. I don't think I will stop learning ever, but there has been a couple of really big challenges, but I've always looked back and I try to learn from it and how to navigate it the next time better. And I've seen that I have over time learned a lot and have become much better in it.
I think even like my job is only stakeholder management. I don't do any design. I'm not a designer, but that's all I do is stakeholder management. And you can only get better at it by continuing to do it. You've got to sort of jump into it, work out different archetypes of people and what their needs are and just adapt, right? So
Yeah.
can't be perfect at the start. It's a process, but very important skill. I think that's one of the biggest skills moving forward as technology improves and makes everyone's jobs easier. I think that communication piece becomes even more important.
And I found that micro interaction and maybe more personal interactions with the stakeholder or the people around you is more effective. Like going for coffees with your colleagues or the people you work with, or what building those relationships. It shouldn't just be a Teams meeting. And that's probably something that I would say, even though I love working from home all the time for COVID, I can see that going to the office and seeing people face to face, or even catching up with them in the kitchen or in the corridor and quickly talking about something has kind of landed in so many initiatives and projects for me than just having like Microsoft Teams meetings. So those interactions and connections are really, really helpful and very, very valuable. So yeah.
I agree. It's nice catching up with people on Zoom all day long, but yeah, you definitely miss that human element, right? I think it's not the same.
Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I learned so much and I really appreciated the time. So thank you so much. If anyone wants to reach out and connect, ask any questions, best way to contact you via LinkedIn?
Yes. Joe, for having me. It was